Have you ever had a moment that made your skin crawl? A shadow where there shouldn't be one? A whisper in an empty room, or something you simply can't explain? If so, we want to hear from you. Here at the Haunted UK podcast, we're always on the lookout for spine-tingling stories to feature in our end-of-season listener episodes and our short haunt series. Whether it's a chilling encounter, a mysterious experience, or something that's haunted you for years, we want your tale. Send your story to contact us at hauntedukpodcast.com. And don't forget to follow us on social media. Facebook, X at hauntedukpod, TikTok and Instagram at hauntedukpodcast, or visit our website www.hauntedukpodcast.com. Now, if you love what we do and want even more haunted goodies, then you can support the show on Patreon and Ko-fi. We've got 2 brilliant tiers, Possessed and Spooked, both packed with bonus content, exclusive episodes, and extra material that'll keep you up all night. But that's not all. We've launched a brand new sister podcast, Haunted UK Fiction, and we're calling all storytellers. Whether you're a published author, an aspiring writer, or someone with a natural gift for spinning eerie tales, we're looking for original fictional short stories and novellas with strong paranormal or supernatural themes. Think suspenseful, mysterious, atmospheric, terrifying, thought-provoking, even darkly magical. If your story is selected, we'll professionally narrate, record, mix and master it into an audiobook-style format, then feature it on the show. You'll get a copy of the finished production to use however you like, and you'll retain full ownership of your work. Submit your story to hauntedukfiction@hotmail.com and follow us on Instagram at hauntedukfiction. So whether it's truth or fiction, if it's haunted, we want it. Now, sit back and enjoy the episode. That evening, my 2 colleagues had gone back to the room and I got chatting to the night manager, who was probably in his 80s at the time. He was an ex-serviceman with a lot of stories, and his family apparently used to own the whole estate, but he sold it and stayed on when his wife passed away. After a few drinks and a chat, I told him about what had happened in our room the previous night, and what he told me sent shivers down my spine. This is episode 70, part 4 of our Listener Stories collection. So for the final time this season, let's listen to your stories. Welcome, dear listeners, to our final Listener Stories episode of this series, but also the last episode of this entire season. Who would have thought that back in June 2021 that the Haunted UK podcast would have reached yet another amazing milestone? In 2026, 7 seasons. We've had a real mixed bag during the last 9 regular episodes, with all types of stories, ranging from hauntings in castles such as Muncaster to strange goings-on in small towns as in the episode Take Care, Caretaker. But for the last 3 episodes, the spotlight has been firmly on you, the amazing listeners who make this show what it is today. And as with those previous episodes, our last one won't disappoint. So without any further delay, let's begin our final journey of this season by hearing from Karen, whose two stories are at completely different ends of the paranormal spectrum. Hi there, my name is Karen, and I just want to begin by saying that I love what you're doing with the show. I live in North Ayrshire and I listen to the podcast on my walk to and from work. I have a couple of stories which I'd like to share. Many years ago, my entire family, 4 sisters, 1 brother, all of our spouses and our children would holiday together in a very large house on the North Yorkshire coast. The house was over 300 years old and had once belonged to a sea captain. During its lifetime, it had been used for a variety of purposes, including the village mortuary, which was housed in the cellar, a cafe, and then once again a family home, my family holiday home. The house consisted of 5 large bedrooms and a huge loft full of sleeping bags and airbeds for the children. They loved spending the night all together chatting and playing games. We all had strange experiences in that house, but the main thing I recall was a very strong odour of sweaty feet that you could almost walk into and through the other side of. There was also a smell of alcohol, maybe whiskey, brandy or rum, followed by a really strong pipe smoke smell. This normally occurred in the upper floor of the house. My sister had a very strange experience one evening in bed. As she lay drifting off to sleep, she felt the duvet slide off her shoulder. She assumed her husband had pulled it across, so she turned to pull it back to find it was folded perfectly in half and her husband was fast asleep. We had many odd experiences like this, but also things like plugs switching off, music turning on, taps running. All of these things would often occur. However, something happened one evening which completely stunned me. I was just drifting off to sleep with my then husband in a room at the end of the hallway. As I lay there, I saw a shadow, a human-like shadow. I watched it take 2 steps into my room, and then, as I went on to describe it at the time, it almost did a limbo dance into the floor, taking jerky movements lower and lower until it disappeared into the floor. As you can imagine, everyone laughed as I recalled the experience over breakfast, and it became the family joke. That was until many years later. While looking to renovate the building, we came across the original plans for the place and realized that the exact spot where I saw my limbo dancing ghost was the exact location where a staircase used to be, which led into the kitchen for the domestic servants to use. It suddenly became very clear that my limbo dancing ghost was in fact walking down a staircase that was no longer there. My second experience happened at my sister's house, and it's something that will stay with me forever. I even posted it on a Facebook page dedicated to phenomena related to incidents such as this. Time slips. So, as just mentioned, I was visiting my sister who was in the middle of tiling her downstairs bathroom. She had her tiles laid on the table as she was making a pattern, and at the time, she was trying to find her tile cutter as it had disappeared. It was a small handheld thing. We both began searching the house. I walked into the kitchen and she headed upstairs. As I came out of the kitchen, I saw my sister back at the table arranging the tiles into a pattern, and as I walked towards her, there in the middle of the doorway lay the tile cutter. The doorway that we had both walked through several times whilst searching for it. I bent down to pick it up and my sister was not at the table when I stood back up. She disappeared. I called her name, and she answered from upstairs. I stood there holding the tile cutter, knowing that without a doubt we would have seen it walking in and out of the room. Looking as my sister walked down the stairs, it blows my mind to this very day. Keep up the good work. Karen. We now hear from M, who has been having brushes with the paranormal since she was 2 years old. She's been kind enough to share a number of her experiences with the show, but she also revealed that she worked in a profession which I personally find very interesting, especially when strange incidents occur. Those stories are being developed into a short haunt. But enough about that. Let's hear from M. Hi Steve. I love the podcast. I really like how people are able to tell their stories in a friendly, non-judgmental environment. So my experiences, well, there's been a few, so feel free to use some, or all, or none, whatever you see fit. The first, although I don't personally remember it, occurred when I was 2 years old. My mum, dad, elder brother and I moved into a new house, where we then lived until we all moved back out. When that time came, I was 16 and my brother was 19, so we were there for quite a while. Mum said that I used to stand halfway up the staircase crying and saying, "But the man, Mummy." One evening, my brother and I were playing in our parents' room, jumping on the bed. At the time, I'd say I was around 6 years old and my brother 9. We both looked out of the door at the same time and saw something that made us both scream so loudly our parents came running upstairs. I can't speak with regards to what my brother saw. We don't really speak anymore these days, but I saw a black dog which just vanished. Just to clarify this for you, at the time, we didn't have a dog. At around the age of 10, I was aware of an older man in my room at night, just sitting there. He wasn't staring or making any noises or anything like that. He was just there. My parents didn't believe me. According to them, it was just a trick of the light or my imagination running away with itself, or it was because I was half asleep. At age 14, one morning my brother came to me and said, "You had your boyfriend over secretly last night?" This wasn't true at all, so I replied, "No, I didn't." But my brother was having none of it. It was what he said next that really gave me the creeps. He replied, "Yes, you did. I could see his feet under your door." From that age onwards, I always felt aware of energies surrounding me and even saw the odd few shadows, but nothing particularly noticeable for years. I've never felt alone, even when I know I am. Fast forward a few years and the incidents got much bigger. My husband and I lived in an old farm cottage, and this was where we had our son. We had those old lamps which you could turn on and off by touching the base. They would frequently be switching themselves on and off, as well as the kettle switching itself on and off and starting to boil. There were also a variety of knocks and footsteps, but the cottage itself never felt bad. When my son was 3 years old, I went into hospital to give birth to my daughter, and my mum came to stay to look after my son. During that short period of time, she also experienced similar phenomena and even started unplugging everything electrical as she felt so freaked out. Whatever it was that called the cottage and the land home even began to have an effect on our dog. We had a working border collie who would walk up the drive heeling to no one. When told to heel, he would kind of zigzag behind you, and this was exactly what we would see him doing when no one was there. We finally moved out of the cottage when my daughter was 3 years old and ended up moving into a house just a couple of villages away. I went ahead of my husband with the kids, and he stayed behind to hoover and mop, making sure we left the place clean and tidy. He said that while he was cleaning, the lights were turning on and off, doors were closing on their own, and when he was trying to fill the mop bucket up, the tap kept turning itself off. He became so annoyed that he said out loud, "If you behave, you can come with us." With that, all of the activity stopped. I also experienced paranormal disturbances away from home. Driving home from work one evening at around 10 p.m, I looked in my rearview mirror to see a person in the back of my car. No features at all, just solid black. I hit the brakes immediately and stopped, then quickly spun around to find no one. Nothing at all. I was so certain I saw someone. When I got home, I was still pretty shaken up, telling my husband what had happened. At that precise moment, the landline rang. It was my mum, to tell me that my dad had suffered a heart attack and they were currently in an ambulance on the way to the hospital. Thankfully, he made a full recovery and is now absolutely fine. I'll leave you for now with one more strange story which involved my husband. About a year ago, he was very ill with pneumonia and was having hallucinations big time. Seeing dragons and weird stuff like that. He was completely off his head. He then said he saw Herbie, our border collie mentioned earlier, but there was a slight problem with this statement. Our beloved Herbie wasn't with us any longer. He'd passed away. Herbie is still definitely here, and he frequently checks in on the kids. My daughter, who is now 12, says she often sees a shadow in her room. When asked what shape it is and how she feels when she sees it, she says she's happy, because it's Herbie. So I guess I feel there's someone or something there watching out for us. Apart from my very young experiences, I've never felt really scared, but I always ensure that I don't ever tell my kids it's just their imagination or a trick of the light. If you see it, then it's there. Even if it's there just for you, that's how it's supposed to be seen. I also tell them to trust how it makes them feel. All the best. M. We now quickly move on to a number of stories sent in from Becky, who, just like M, her experiences began at a very young age. First, let me start off like many of these emails do, by telling you how much I enjoy the podcast. Your episodes have kept me company on many walks to work and have made hours of housework much more bearable. Keep up the great work. I'm a forever fan and listener. I have many stories, as I've experienced the supernatural from a very young age, but I suppose to make it easier to compile, I'll start from the very beginning. From the age of 5 is when it all began back in the 90s. We lived in this same house up in Kent up until 2003, so I'll start there. I would see things when lying in bed at night. Things moving that shouldn't, such as toys and pieces of clothing. Whenever this would happen, I would freeze with fear. Too scared to even shout to my mother, as I feared whatever was making these things happen would hear me. I would eventually build up the courage after many attempts and count to 3, and my mother would come and tell me, "It's just your mind playing tricks on you. You've got a vivid imagination. You're fine. Just go back to sleep," which I would accept and duly go back to sleep. But looking back on this as an adult, I don't think my imagination will be so powerful as to make a dressing gown move and fall off the door. My first experience with the elusive Hat Man and shadow people started around the same age. One night I woke up from my sleep to see a tall, slim man in a top hat standing at the foot of my bed. I was terrified, but somehow not frozen in fear, as I managed to pull the covers up over my head and repeated quietly, "Please go away. Please." I pulled the covers down slightly and found to my horror that he'd gotten closer. I pulled the covers back over my head and asked again, "Please, go away." But after looking again, he was even closer. I was terrified and pulled the covers up again, begging slightly louder this time. And when I looked, he was gone. I only saw him once more in my 20s during a sleep paralysis episode, but touch wood, he's not been back. I'd often see the silhouette of a man stood in my parents' room looking out the window, or as funny as it sounds, someone sitting on the toilet as I would go past the bathroom. I would always run when needing to go back downstairs, as it was always at this moment that I'd see them. I'd often see shadow figures as I know them now, always in the same places, always upstairs, but it was towards the end of the 90s when I saw my first full-body apparition, and it was none other than my beloved grandmother, known affectionately as Nanny. A few years before we moved, my parents were doing some remodeling, and at this time my nanny was in hospital very ill, but at that age us children weren't really given any details other than that she was sick and in hospital. As I was helping my dad, something told me to look up, and as I looked towards the kitchen door, I saw my dear Nanny. She was as clear as day, wearing her nightie and dressing gown with her signature moccasin slippers, as if she was really there. She smiled at me, and I have no idea how long I was stood there staring at her, but eventually my gaze shifted, and she was gone. I stood there in disbelief, telling myself, no, I didn't just see Nanny. She's not dead. But then a few minutes later, my mum received a phone call from her brother at the hospital, letting her know that her mother had just passed away. But that's not quite the end of the story, because just after that, it started to snow, and my Nan loved the snow. Fast forward to my late 20s, and I hadn't experienced anything as vivid as my early years, although I did see the odd shadow, but nothing really sticks out in my mind that's worthy of writing down. So instead, I'll take you to after I'd had my children and to the present day. I'm now 38 and living in Scotland with my husband and our 2 sons. Scotland, as you know, has a long and colourful history and is home to many ghosts, and I'm living with some right now. I don't know who they are, just as I didn't know who the shadows in my childhood home were, but we coexist. I often see them darting into rooms or stood in corners as I pass, but I don't feel threatened. However, they are tricksters. My phone is never where I left it, and quite often my Bluetooth earphones will go out of range because my phone isn't anywhere near where I put it. Strange knocks and bangs that can't be explained are a regular occurrence, and even though I try to debunk a lot of what happens, some of it, I just can't. I burn sage when they get, as I call it, rowdy, and this calms them down, but sage doesn't rid you of spirits, it just appeases them. I've been sat at this very desk speaking to my sisters on the phone, and the drawer would start shaking. At first, I thought I'd knocked it, and it had picked up momentum, but when I tried to replicate it, it didn't move in the same rhythmic way. In fact, it hardly moved at all unless I did it purposefully with my hand. They also won't let me sleep until my husband gets home from work, which can be as late as midnight. They would wake me by poking my cheek or blowing in my face. Now I just stay up until he's home, but there was one occasion when I was very ill with food poisoning and I was trying to sleep, but heard a voice, at which point, being tired and annoyed, I sat up without even thinking and said, "What the fuck did you say?" I'm not the first in my family to challenge ghosts like this. My sister has her own stories, and where most would freeze in fear, she would challenge the ghost. Only my sister could square up to a ghost. I'll have to ask her if I can share some of her stories with you, and some are quite chilling. It would seem I've also passed this gift down to my children, as they often tell me that they've seen shadows, many times in the same places I've seen them. I've never spoken to my children about ghosts, as I don't want to scare them, but with them coming to me with their own stories can only mean, in my eyes, it's real. As I previously said, my sister has a few stories, but the gift doesn't stop there. My other siblings also have a few. I'll try to compile them for you with their permission. We're the sort of people that once comfortable with someone's company will ask, "So do you believe in ghosts?" Thank you again for everything you do. I look forward to every episode. Becky. Not long after Becky's first batch of stories were sent in, she got in touch with a few more. And here they are. All these take place in my late 20s and early 30s when I worked for a popular pub chain which I won't name. I worked in 3 of their establishments, and you guessed it, they were all haunted. Lucky me. And I don't say that with sarcasm. In my first pub in southwest London, we would close down at night and clean everything, only to come in the next day and find tiny handprints all over the mirrors and windows. The cellar was the worst. A dark, cold space where you'd always have the feeling of being watched, or even feeling someone standing right behind you, peering over your shoulder to see what you were doing. Phantom customers were always present in all 3 establishments. I'd be busy polishing glasses or stocking a fridge when I'd see someone approach the bar out of my peripheral vision. I'd let them know that I'd be right with them, only to find no one there. The second pub was in the Highlands of Scotland and had been a hotel for decades. Again, the usual phantom customers would make their presences known, but this time there was a ghostly chef that I'd see every so often. I knew he wasn't one of ours as his uniform was the wrong colour and he wore a white hat. He'd pop in behind the bar every so often, and even though this sounded frightening, he seemed kind, and I got the feeling he loved his job and continues to do it, even in the afterlife. More phantom customers came with the third pub I worked in, with one particular patron who I'd see seated giving me a wave for assistance out of my peripheral vision, only to find there was no one at the table. In my experience, pubs are always haunted, and a great place to visit if you fancy sharing a pint or a spirit with, well, a spirit. Many years ago, on holiday in France, we were visiting a friend of my dad's. He was giving us a tour of his house, and as we were going down the stairs of the basement, I saw a boy under the staircase looking up. I'd never seen him before, but I assumed it was his son. As we descended into the basement, we came to his son's room, and we went back in to have a look around. It seemed like it was the room of a teenage boy. It was revealed to me by my dad after his friend had gone ahead that the room belonged to his son, who'd passed away in a moped accident. And would you believe it? On the shelf in that room was a picture of the boy, the same boy I'd seen under the stairs. And to cap that off, my sisters and I were staying in the house that night, and the room that we were given was the boy's room. We all squeezed onto a sofa bed because none of us wanted to sleep in his bed. I didn't tell my sisters what I'd seen earlier until the morning, but I didn't sleep a wink that night. Another one, still in France, we were living there at the time, and I'd gone to a Halloween party on Halloween night itself. I wasn't enjoying the party, so I decided to leave early. I was riding a moped at the time, and it was around midnight, so I took myself home up through the lanes. As I was coming up the hill past the cemetery, I saw a little girl stood at the gates. She was wearing a communion dress, but I didn't stop to say hello. Instead, I sped home as fast as that moped would take me. I told my mum as soon as I got home, and she always believed me when I said I'd had sightings such as these. When I saw the little girl's mum, I'm so glad I had the courage to tell her, because it brought her comfort. Kind regards, Becky. We next hear from Ryan, who has a number of strange tales to tell going all the way back to when his daughter was a baby. His experiences also include several paranormal investigations which involved his now grown-up daughter and her boyfriend. These investigations produced some very strange results. Hi Steve, I have a story that you might find interesting. An experience that happened years ago when my daughter, who is now 18, was just a baby. This would have been around 2008 to 2009. She was on her changing mat in her bedroom, and I was getting her ready for bed after her bath. She kept looking over my right shoulder towards the light, giggling and smiling, so much so that I looked behind me, expecting to see my wife Sam, but there was nobody there. This went on for a couple more minutes, until Izzy looked at me in the face and said, "My, how you've grown." Creeped me out a bit, to say the least. I always thought it was my gran who'd come through. She passed away in 2001, who was looking after my daughter. Fast forward to 2023 to 2024, and Izzy, her boyfriend and myself were doing a ghost investigation on an old railway footbridge not far from our house. We were using a spirit box and an EMF meter, and we were getting some strange EMF readings, as if something had walked past us. It then started lighting up in answer to our questions. I asked if it was Patricia who was with us. Patricia was my gran's name, but there was no response. I then asked if they'd seen me walking my dog around here, and the spirit box then said, Jasp. Jasper was the name of our old dog who died 8 years earlier. Our new dog was called Oscar. I then asked it if Doris was the person that was with us. The EMF meter then went straight to red. Doris was my nan's name, and she had passed away the year before Izzy was born. My nan had also met Jasper when he was young, but had never met Oscar. It was really nice to think that my nan was with us. We've had a couple of interesting investigations since then, an investigation in an old woodland where I could hear children and people talking but not able to distinguish words. Unfortunately, nothing showed up on an EVP recording nor on video. We also investigated an abandoned, burned-out farmhouse near the area where I used to live. This place had quite a sad backstory to it. I actually knew the owner. His name was Joseph Dodd, and he was a bit of a prickly character, shall we say. He used to stop and have a chat with me if he saw me out messing with my car. Don't get me wrong, he was nice enough, but I would never step 1 foot on his land. He left the farmhouse in the early 2000s and moved to the seaside town of Rhyl. The farm was vacant then for a while. The next person I remember living there was a bloke named David Cleward Davis, and he squatted there. He was known as the horse hoarder, and there was even a TV program made about him. He tragically lost his daughter in a car crash, then went off the rails. The RSPCA took his horses off him, and I think one was put down. Not long after that, he disappeared. My daughter, her boyfriend, and I investigated the farmhouse, which was now a ruin because of the aforementioned fire. It was the first time we'd used the Estes method. I made sure not to tell Harrison, my daughter's boyfriend, anything about the history of the house. But during the Estes session, the names Joseph and David were mentioned. While talking to Joseph, Harrison said, "Fuck off." I said, "No, I won't," but he insisted by saying again, "Fuck off, please." Really quite funny. Later, we went into a small outbuilding which had an office chair in it, so I sat there and tried the Estes method myself. During this session, I had my eyes closed and a blindfold on. I could see what looked like the shadow of a person. The whole figure at first, then just the upper part, looking at me and moving around as if it was studying me. I didn't say anything, thinking it was my imagination, but on the video, Izzy, my daughter, said that a bird had flown inside the outbuilding, even though nothing showed up on the recording. There was one other strange thing about my Estes session, which I found quite disturbing. I kept hearing a voice coming over the spirit box, a very specific voice. I felt it was the voice of my daughter's boyfriend, Harrison, which led me to believe that I'd come into contact with a mimic. I've since read that it's not a good idea to interact with a mimic, as it could be demonic. I wish I'd known that beforehand. Best regards, Ryan Thomas. I personally think that dolls can be some of the creepiest toys imaginable. Maybe it's the eyes, or maybe it's some of the eerie technology that seems to give them a life of their own. Our next listener has sent in a number of strange experiences, and one of them involves a doll. My name is MG and I live in Northamptonshire. I used to live in a flat in St Crispin's with my mum when I was a child. The entrance to the flat was located at the end of a long corridor. Walking through the corridor to the flat was absolutely fine, but from the house down the corridor to get outside, it was the spookiest experience I've ever had. It felt like every ghost's eyes were upon you, staring at you all the way down as you walked out. I came back from school one day and my mum could hear me laughing and talking to someone in my bedroom, so she came in to ask me who I was talking to. This was when I told her about the little boy in my room. Now, I can't see. I'm completely blind, so it baffled us and spooked us when I knew exactly where he was sitting and that he was wearing a black cap. I always had strange things happen to me during the night. Maybe it was because I was about 4 years old at the time, but for some unknown reason, I seemed to be the easy target. One night when I was just put to bed, my mum tucked me in and said goodnight to me as usual. However, when she left the room, I could feel a strong presence right next to my bed, as if someone was sitting down on the floor to the left of my bed. And let me say this, it was definitely not the little boy. This presence felt more ominous. All I could do was try to ignore it, focusing on the audiobook playing in the background and rocking myself to sleep. I once received a doll for Christmas, which I named Amy. Amy was a type of doll where you'd say hello to it, and it would turn its head and say, "Mama." I put her on the windowsill in my room, and I remember one night, for some reason, I woke up at what must have been around 2 a.m. I must have just had a dream or something, but I heard something completely and utterly strange. I turned my head towards the windowsill to hear my doll swiveling its head and whispering something that I couldn't understand. Suffice to say, I ended up putting that doll in the bin the moment I got out of bed the next day. I was so creeped out. During the autumn and winter months, I annoyingly managed to catch the flu. I remember while I was trying to recover in bed, I put my hand out of the duvet to give myself some air. I was very hot. The next thing, I felt the soft material of a dress brushing against the palm of my hand. The moment I called my mum, this apparition vanished, but I could tell that it was a woman. However, it was the next series of incidents that topped it off for me. I came back home from seeing a friend, and not long after it was time for bed. My mum did her usual thing of tucking me in and wishing me good night. Around 5 or 10 minutes after she'd left the room, I felt like I was being lifted up by a woman's hands. These were not the hands of my mother. I woke up again in the middle of the same night, and it felt like there was somebody sitting on my bed. I couldn't take it anymore, so I got out of bed and went to sleep in my mum's bed. Later in life, my interest would once again be sparked by this block of flats, so I did a bit of research into them, and what I found out gave me chills. The flats used to be a mental hospital. Where we were living was the women's block, and the block next door was the children's block. It then all made perfect sense. Yours sincerely, MG. We now hear from Orshi, who kindly wrote into the show to share 2 stories which happened to her at very different times in her life, when she was a very little girl and when she was a teenager. The first is a poignant tale of an appearance on Christmas Eve of what she felt was the spirit of someone very close to her. The second, well, that's the story of what could quite possibly have been the ghost of a tragic former inhabitant of the house she was staying at. I have 2 stories I'd like to share with you, and both of them happened to me. My first story took place on Christmas Eve, 3 months after my mother died. I was just 3 years old at the time, and my whole family, my grandma, auntie, uncle and cousins, had gathered in the front living room to sing a traditional carol before entering the living room to open our presents. Our Christmas tree was in the living room, and the presents were placed all around the bottom of it. Everyone was understandably somber and still in mourning, but my family tried to put a brave face on the whole situation for me so that I could enjoy the holiday spirit as much as possible. The living room door had a glass obscure panel in it which blurred whatever was behind it. Looking through this window, I could make out figures, but not their faces. As we stood there and sang, I looked up and saw through this living room window the figure of a brunette woman dressed in a white dress just standing in front of the door. I shouted out and pointed at the figure saying, "Look, an angel!" A little backstory here for you. In Transylvanian and Hungarian culture, the angels come down from heaven on Christmas Eve to bring presents to children. We don't have Santa Claus. I genuinely thought I saw the angel bringing the presents on Christmas Eve. My grandma looked at me but just continued to sing the song. This memory has never left me. Years later, when I learned the angels weren't bringing presents to put under the tree, I asked my grandma who the woman was I'd seen through the glass of the living room door on that Christmas Eve. She told me there wasn't anyone in the room as we were all outside singing the carol. Personally, I believe it was my mother's spirit, appearing only for me to see. My second story takes place years later when I was a teenager. I was invited to a sleepover at a friend's house. Actually, it was her grandparents' house, and she used to stay with them for the summer holidays. Her bedroom was in the attic, which had 2 rooms. These were separated from each other by a door. The exit was through another door to the staircase leading down to the rest of the house. My friend always told me that her grandparents' house was haunted, and that she'd sometimes hear footsteps and cupboard doors opening and closing, but she was used to these phenomena. On the evening I stayed over, I asked her about the history of the house and its ghost. She explained that years ago, before they moved in, a woman was murdered in the house by a burglar. After what seemed like hours of chatting, we both went to sleep. In the middle of the night, we were both woken up by loud noises coming from the other side of the attic door. We heard very heavy footsteps, then running, then quiet for a few seconds, before the attic door opened halfway. We both jumped out of bed and ran downstairs, waking my friend's grandfather up with hysterical screaming. We begged him to come and check out who or what had been moving around in the attic room next to us, but also who'd opened the attic door. My friend and I both grabbed a knife from the kitchen and, cowering behind my friend's grandfather, we climbed the stairs back up to the attic room. To our horror, the door that separated the attic from the attic room was now firmly shut, with no sign of an intruder or anything at all. My friend's grandfather was quite annoyed with us for waking him with what he called our childish imagination, but we both knew what we'd seen and heard was real. Unsurprisingly, we both stayed in the living room for the rest of the night, and I never went back to a sleepover at that house ever again. I hope you liked my stories, and it would be great to hear them read out on your podcast. Thank you. Orshi. Our next couple of stories come from Logan, a long-time listener of the show who has a fascinating tale about his grandfather who used to be a police officer. Whilst on duty decades ago, he found himself entering a house which at the time was the epicenter of one of the most famous paranormal cases of all time. But before that, we hear about an innocent shift at work being interrupted by a strange visitor. Hello. This isn't my story, but one of my mum's friends from work. I've been listening to your podcasts and I can't get enough of it. It's a short story but mysterious. Hope you enjoy. I was working the night shift at the drinks warehouse and I was with a few other lads in the break room. We were all talking about football, I think, when we spotted something on the security camera monitor, which was a bit more like a TV at the head of a long table. In one of the cameras in the bottom right of the screen, we saw a man walk across the storage room wearing a yellow cap, which was very peculiar because we all wore green caps. I asked the rest of the guys if they'd seen it too. Everyone confirmed they had. We continued to watch and saw him walk through the storage room and into another, but on the camera in that second room, it showed nobody. He just didn't appear. My friend and I went to see if anyone was there. I called out and was terrified when I was greeted with an answer. A coffee mug that a worker had left behind fell straight off one of the shelves onto the floor and smashed. We hurried back to the break room, half frightened, half questioning ourselves. A short story, I know, but one I felt worth mentioning. And talking about one worth mentioning, my granddad is a retired police officer, and he went to investigate the Conjuring House in Enfield, 284 Green Street, the site of the Enfield poltergeist haunting, when he was in service. He told me that he had things like glasses and books thrown at him and his colleagues. He also told me that a chair from the dining room downstairs was moved into the living room while he was searching the bedrooms. I find it amazing that he experienced these paranormal events. Sadly, he didn't get to meet Ed and Lorraine Warren, but he did talk to the family and said the daughter, Janet, was very troubled. But overall, he said that the spirit there didn't seem evil, but more mysterious. Just a little fact about my granddad, and I thought it would be cool to have a primary source about the Conjuring House. Hope you liked my stories. From one of your biggest fans, Logan. It's now time to hear our last story of this episode and our last story of this whole season. A story sent in by John who, whilst on a work-based trip with 2 other colleagues, checked into a guest house for 2 nights, one of which none of them would ever forget. So get comfortable for our final voyage of Season 7 and let's hear about the green light. Hello all. I'm going to tell you about my experience, and I won't lie, it's bothered me for over 20 years and is by far the creepiest thing that has ever happened to me. In 2005, I was the area coordinator for the outdoor retail company. My position required me to travel extensively, visiting a range of large, out-of-town vacant units, each being considered as a possible site for a new store. The primary focus of my work was to carry out comprehensive inspections of these empty properties, carefully evaluating their suitability for conversion into retail spaces that would meet the needs and standards set by the company. During these site visits, I was responsible for scrutinizing every aspect of the units, from their location and accessibility to the structural conditions and potential for refurbishment. After gathering all relevant information, I would assess whether each site fulfilled the necessary criteria for developing a successful retail outlet for. This process formed a crucial part of the company's strategy to expand its presence and reach new customers through well-chosen locations. We were never put in travel lodges or premier inns, but instead we were put in old grotty guest houses. I can't remember what particular area we were covering on this occasion. I think it was Thurston. Again, in a grotty guest house, there was me and 2 others, and we all had to share a room. We all went to bed on the first night and didn't have too much to drink as we were all rather tired, but we were all woken up in the small hours to the sound of the guest house door opening. I was in the bed to the left, with one guy dead opposite the door and my other colleague to the right. As the door opened, we heard shuffling around the room. It was pitch black, and we couldn't see anything, but the shuffling soon ended, and the door closed itself. There was also a green light at shoulder height that moved around the room. This light was around the size of a pinprick. Now, this is where it gets weird, because none of us knew the other was awake, yet we all apparently witnessed the same thing. Something that would become very evident very soon. Not long after this strange series of events, we all must have fallen asleep. The next morning was upon us, and one by one we went down for breakfast. My colleague sat down and started by asking, "Did you go out of the room last night?" To which I replied, "No." But I did ask if he'd also heard the door open. Our other colleague then came down and sat down with us, and the first words out of his mouth were, "So come on, green light? What was all that about?" We looked at each other in cold silence. That evening my 2 colleagues had gone back to the room, and I got chatting to the night manager, who was probably in his 80s at the time. He was an ex-serviceman with a lot of stories, and his family apparently used to own the whole estate, but he sold it and stayed on when his wife passed away. After a few drinks and a chat, I told him about what had happened in our room the previous night. What he then told me sent shivers down my spine. He said that years earlier, a young couple had stopped at the guest house and stayed in that very same room. The husband had gotten quite drunk and tried to attack his wife. She managed to get away and locked herself in the bathroom. The night porter called the local policeman on duty, who came out to investigate. The man was apparently going mad in the bedroom, and he supposedly beat the policeman to death. The man then jumped out of the window but broke his leg and was writhing around in agony until more police turned up to deal with the situation. The room was pitch black as the other police officers entered, and the only way they could establish where the body of their colleague was located was by noticing the tiny green light on his radio in the corner of the room. The night porter then told me that every so often, that very policeman who was murdered will still check in on the room, do a small patrol, and then leave. I swear to you this is true. I'm hoping this is a safe community to share such things. Regards, John. And that is where we draw a line under this episode and Season 7. We truly hope that you've not only enjoyed these 4 Listener Stories episodes, but also all of the other content that has contributed to making this season so fantastic. Our appreciation goes out to each and every one of you who took the time to send in your stories. It's been a real pleasure for us to share them with our audience. So what lies ahead? We'll be taking a short break to recharge and get ready for Season 8. That's right, Season 8 is on the way, promising more stories, more scares, and even more astonishing tales. Until then, from all of us at the Haunted UK podcast, we bid you farewell. So as always, stay safe and take care.